Robocop 3 on the Super Nintendo. Well, you may know this game. It's a bit tricky. It's rather hard and well, the graphics are okay. I think the sound is decent, but the game is absolutely unforgivingly difficult. So much so that many people absolutely hate this game. But there is a nice surprise because it was also ported to the Megadrive and to the Gamegear. As you can see, this is the Megadrive version. I personally think it's a little bit more playable, and this is a version you may not be all that familiar with. There is a Master System version. Yes, superficially these look very similar, but the Master System version is basically a port of the Game Gear version. I don't have a Game Gear myself, so I can't really compare that, but remembering playing the Game Gear version on an emulator, if my memory serves me correct, it's rather similar to the Master System version. They just changed a few things around in the level maps to adjust it to a smaller screen. But that's not what I'm really going to cover. I'm just going to do a comparison video. First you're going to see footage from the Super Nintendo version, and you'll definitely spot the problems with that game. But then I'm going to play the Mega Drive version and finally the Master System version, and you'll see that those versions are more playable. When the game was ported to the Mega Drive and to the Master System and Game Gear, it was done by a different team of programmers. The original Super Nintendo version is the version with the best graphics and sound, but with the worst playability. That version was done by Ocean. I've heard a story about that. There were actually two programmers involved. The original programmer apparently was very inexperienced, and he got replaced by another programmer who was kind of a programmer who really wanted the games to be hard. And the people who made it weren't terribly excited about doing that project, but somehow Acclaim bought the rights to do a port for the Sega systems and release it on the Flying Edge label, and this port was done by different programmers. And they were probably aware of the original Super Nintendo version's flaws, as that version on the Sega is much more playable. For instance, you see that they've added the difficulty option and they've made the game a little bit more forgiving. And surprisingly, I think the Master System version is the most playable version of the game. Yes, it may have the worst sound and graphics compared to like the Super Nintendo, but it is the most playable. The programmers have fixed all sorts of issues that basically the original programmers of the Super Nintendo version should have done. I've heard that the playtesters at Ocean couldn't even play the game. And even the original graphic designer couldn't play it. I've seen an interview somewhere on YouTube where the graphic designer from Ocean was interviewed, and he kind of explains the history about the game. And well, he told about the programmers and the testers, and well, that he didn't really like doing that game. So that's kind of why the game didn't really become out to be good, and it was one of the first Super Nintendo games they did. But anyway, the Sega version is, well, surprisingly better, especially the Master System version. I know the Master System version is a bit rare, but well, if you want to have a look at it, you can also check out the Game Gear version, which is pretty much the same thing except with a few small differences. So let's get to it. So, first we're going to take a look at the Super Nintendo version. If you think that the image is a bit stuttery, that is caused by my DVD recorder. I don't know why this happens, and it really annoys me. I think it's some kind of sync problem. I'm not really sure. So first we get the high score screen and the title screen. This version of the game has very few options. There's no difficulty selection, no lives, no continues. There's really no options other than choosing stereo sound or mono sound. So, we are going now, and you see right off the bat it's pretty hard. That robot thing that shoots some kind of weird projectiles that keep following you, and they can cause quite a bit of damage. It's very difficult to shake them loose. In this version of the game it is possible to shoot power-ups. So any kind of pickups you see, you can accidentally shoot them and they'll go away. Yeah, that's a really dick move of the programmers. This problem does not occur in the Sega versions. There's that stupid robot again that shoots these weird homing projectiles. In this version you can also punch, but the punch is assigned to a different button, and that's really annoying. The controls are much better in the Sega version. That's, I think, one of the main differences. The Sega version has all the features that this version has, but they are more intuitive. The button layout is better on the Sega version, and in the Super Nintendo version it's a bit convoluted. Oh, I'm out of ammo. There's those annoying motorbikes. Apparently if you touch them you lose quite a bit of health. I mean, isn't Robocop supposed to be, well, armored against those sort of things? In the movie he can pretty much jump off a building with no harm done. And here he gets a lot of hurt from, well, just a motorcycle. Those flying rocket droppers are also annoying. There is a way to shoot upwards, but it's assigned to a different button than the normal shoot button. Again, this is much easier in the Sega version, where you can just aim up by simply pushing the joystick up. But here they had to use a separate button, simply because the Super Nintendo has so many buttons on its controller, and they felt the need to use all of them, whether it makes sense or not. Oh, these jumping bits are really tricky in this version. Jumping on the Sega version is much easier. And as you can see, if you miss a jump you go all the way back to the beginning, even if you're at the end of the stage. Well, that's a really dick move. And this is why people think this is such a frustrating game. The programmers should have put just a little bit more time in fixing those sort of annoyances. But I think the playtesters didn't really take their job too seriously, because I'm sure they would have reported this to the programmers. But I guess they kinda had the attitude from, well, we need to get this game out as soon as possible and we can't really be bothered. And you know, at the time in 1992 hard games were kind of accepted. Nowadays you wouldn't really accept that sort of difficulty anymore. Or that sort of no continuous bullshit. But at the time, well, yeah, games were only made for hardcore gamers and not for casual players. They didn't really care. You just had to be good, and you just had to, well, be put up with all the annoyances that the game throws at you. But nowadays we ain't got the time to play the game all day. We just want to play the game for half an hour and pick it up later. I mean, modern games all have a save feature, because we have too much precious time that we need to divide. I must say the graphics are quite nice, at least they're detailed, and they've done an okay job. I wonder if they were created with deluxe paint. Ocean's games always have a bit of an 8-bit feel to them. And that's also probably why Lethal Weapon didn't really get a lot of slack. Because it, well, looks a bit like an Amiga game. Or a bit like an 8-bit micro game on steroids. Ocean was quite comfortable with 8-bit platforms and with the ST and the Amiga, but the SNES was kind of a different league. I think the game has okay sound effects. I mean, the gunshots sound realistic, and when you shoot the guys they make a nice oomph sound effect, and the sound of the wrecking balls are also a nice touch. But all these things can't really save the game's problems. I feel they should have tested the game a little bit more and just spent maybe a few weeks or a month to just make the difficulty a little bit more balanced. They should have given it a difficulty option. They should have done all the things that the programmers of the Sega version did. They correctly identified the game's flaws and they addressed those. Another annoying motorbike. But I have heard that one of the designers of this game couldn't even pass the first stage of the game himself. Well, you see, that was the Super Nintendo version. Oh, another annoyance with this game is the high score input. When you scroll through the letters, you can only scroll in one direction. You can't scroll back. It is not a cyclic list. So when you reach the letter Z and you want to go back a character, you think, oh, I push up again to go to the letter A. But nope, you have to scroll all the way back. You can see that happening here when I try to enter the character A. So that's a bit annoying. A lot of other games just have a cyclic list. I wonder if that graphic is digitized. It probably is. Now on to the Megadrive version. Very nitty-gritty FM synthesis sound. I quite like that, although all the versions have their charms when it comes to the sound. The Megadrive sound is also noticeably louder. And this version was released by Flying Edge, which was really just a Sega label from Acclaim. And this is probably one of the biggest improvements. An options menu with a difficulty selection and an option to choose the amount of lives and continues. And also in this version, if you die somewhere, you don't go all the way back to the beginning. That makes this version a lot more forgiving. And you automatically start punching when you run out of ammo. You don't have to hit another fire button. And this is also a nice improvement. Shooting upwards is simply done by using the D-pad up plus the fire button, unlike the Super Nintendo version where they use a separate button for this, which is really inconvenient. I'm not entirely sure if the graphics are directly converted from the Super Nintendo version. I think they are to an extent, but they may have also redrawn certain graphics. At least the Master System and Gamegear version have had their graphics completely redrawn. You will see that later when I show that bit of footage. I think these graphics were probably just converted from the Super Nintendo. This is actually quite a decent conversion. I think the programmers must have had access to the original design documents and source code and graphical assets. I'm not sure if the programmers at Ocean gave them any support on it. Oh, that robot with the chainsaw is a real pain in the ass too. I think that lamppost is really nice with that flickering light bulb in it. And again, here you can see an example of how much easier it is to shoot upwards in this version. This also applies to the Master System and Gamegear versions. This is one of the best weapons in the game, the laser. The only downside is that it's a bit slow, but it is very powerful. Now there we have the boss. Getting to this point on the Super Nintendo version is a lot harder. Beating this boss is really just a matter of memorization.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Well, Robocop says thank you for your cooperation. I think that's a really nice speech sample. I wonder if they've actually sampled this from the movie. I can't remember that from the Super Nintendo version. I'm not even sure if it's in there. Still, I wonder why Acclaim even bothered to do a Sega port, because the Super Nintendo version wasn't all that well received. But maybe they felt they could salvage the game a little bit. And well, there wasn't really a Robocop game on the Megadrive at the time. Maybe except for Robocop vs. the Terminator, but I'm not really sure which one was released first. Robocop vs. the Terminator is an excellent game, by the way. The Mega Drive version is in fact a lot better than the SNES version. The Gamegear and Mastersystem version of that game are actually quite impressive too. Oh, now we come to a really annoying bit. Those drones are really tough, and they cause a lot of damage when you touch them. My strategy for getting through this section without too much damage is simply jumping over them. Now we come to a little bit of a hard part. Now Nico, that girl from the movie, has to fix Ed 209, and this is a scene very similar to what you see in the movie. In the movie, she can even make Ed 209 say a phrase like being as loyal as a puppy. I thought that was a funny part. Oh yeah, that's a good tip. Jump over the energy pickup because you're going to need it later. Halfway through you're kind of running low on health because you will take damage. You can't really avoid it, as you can see. And having that health pickup can save your neck. So, thanks Ed209, thanks for your cooperation. Oh yes, somehow Robocop is afraid of rocks. This will kill him. Even that rock crusher will kill him. Luckily, on the Master System version, they've modified that rock crusher a little bit. But you will see that just in a minute or so. And as you can see, if you die in this version, you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the stage. This version has respawn points. And I think this game needed it. The rocks make quite a nice thumping sound. Again, a nice speech sample, something they've probably sampled from the movie. So now onto the Master System version, which is in fact very similar to the Game Gear version. It is pretty much based off the same source code, at least I expect it to be, because the Master System and the Game Gear are essentially one and the same thing, more or less. The only difference, as far as I can recall from emulator gameplay sessions, is that the level maps have gotten a few modifications and that the sprites are a bit smaller on the Game Gear. As you can see, the graphics have been redrawn. I guess the graphic designer couldn't really repurpose the Super Nintendo or Megadrive graphics. But even though the graphics have been redrawn, they still look quite faithful. I think the Master System version captures the Super Nintendo version's intent really well, but does certain things a lot better in regards to gameplay. This version is not bad at all. This version is actually quite playable. Because this is the version where I can even pass stage 2. And also in this version, pretty much everything is there. Everything that the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive version have, even though they have made some alterations to the maps. But all the weapons are there, pretty much. I think this is actually quite a bit better than the Robocop game on the NES. The NES version of Robocop 3 is a bit of an oddball because it is partly based off the Commodore 64 version. That version does have some really cool intro music by Jeroen Tel, The version on the C64 is well, yeah, rather nice in terms of sound, and it's got a cool intro. So we're using the laser weapon here. I think the sound effects have translated quite well, even though they're just 8 bits with square waves. I think they did a decent job here. Oh, we're almost at the end boss of the stage. And as you'd expect, this is very similar to the other versions. So I died here, but unlike the SNES version, I don't have to go back all the way to the beginning. It's these small improvements that make this version much more playable and less frustrating. I do like that laser sound effect. It sounds like it really makes some kind of impact. So that was it. That was the first stage, and you see this was very easy in fact. Well, easy compared to the SNES version. Obviously I'm playing this on an easy difficulty level. I'm not really sure how it is when I ramp up the difficulty selection. I haven't tried it. I always play my games on easy. I think those brick graphics are quite nice. I just like the shading on the backgrounds here. The windows look quite nice. I mean, if you look at the yellow bricks, they almost look like the Megadrive version. The Master System was quite capable in the graphics department. Oh, there we have those annoying drones again. But luckily here they are easier to deal with, because when you ride a lift down, the segment is a lot shorter. I'm not sure if this is caused by the easy difficulty mode. As I said before, I haven't tried it on normal or on hard. Maybe it's the same in all the difficulty levels. I'm not sure. So now we get to the add 2 or 9 section, and again it's recommended to don't use that power pickup yet. Just use it when you get on 50% health or something. Because as you see, you will get low on health quickly, and here I couldn't get the energy pickup in time. Oh man, that droid keeps shooting. I think Air 2 or 9 is not doing a particularly good job, because he shoots his rockets really slowly. Robocop himself can fire a lot faster. So you see, that was perfectly doable. Well, try that on the Super Nintendo version. And here we have the rock crusher again. And the rock crusher itself doesn't do you any damage anymore, although the rocks can still kill you. But we've got a nice respawn point! Haha! So, just jump over the rocks and you'll be fine. At the end of this segment, you're going to fight some kind of weird demon. And there's even a flamethrower weapon. I think this game works really well on 8 bits. The graphics have a good amount of detail in them and good use of color. Somehow this game just works well on 8 bits. I think it's just really interesting to see that a game that's really flawed is really flawed and falls flat on its face on the Super Nintendo actually really comes to fruition on the Master System. It's demon time! Again, this sort of boss is a bit of a joke, I believe, from the original designer, because this demon isn't really in the movie. I think they just put it in there as some kind of joke, as a gimmick. I mean, why would Robocop fight a demon? So, if you're wondering who came up with that, it was the original graphics designer. So, the next stage is a flying stage. And, well, this is one of the harder stages on the other versions. But again, here it's quite doable. This scene is basically a direct reference to the movie. In this game there are 2 flying stages like this. And in the movie you only have this at the end, when Robocop flies into the OCP's headquarters tower. Still, I wonder what those things are. I think there's some kind of flying mines. Those things weren't in the movie. I think they just were just put in there to have something to shoot at. It is very typical for Ocean to sort of mix all sorts of different game engine concepts into one game. They often had a platform section, a driving section, a flying section and some kind of puzzle minigame. But in this game the puzzle minigame section was left out. But in a game like Batman the movie, for instance, they had a flying section and a driving section and a puzzle. And in the original Robocop on the Commodore 64 and Spectrum, they also had a puzzle section. So you've seen me playing all the 3 versions. You see, I really sucked at playing the Super Nintendo version. I couldn't even get past the first stage. I believe I've only been able to do that just a few times in my life. A friend of mine was much better at it in the late 90s, but even he couldn't get past the second stage. It's just incredibly difficult and really unforgiving. Just the lack of continues and, well, the lack of respawn points makes this game incredibly unforgiving. And these are the kind of things that the Sega versions have fixed. So, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.